Welcome to Beyond Rent, the property management podcast brought to you by Rent Manager. Each episode, we sit down with an expert to talk industry updates, tech solutions, and top tips for those in the property management space. And now, let's get to the conversation and go Beyond Rent.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond Rent. How do you pay your bills? If I had to guess, you pay them online because that's how most people prefer to make payments these days, right? All of our payments are digitized. That's how most people want to make payments. However, there are still many that are making rent payments the old school way. So today we have Chris from Zego joining us to talk about the impact of digital payments and all that surrounds it. So Chris, welcome to Beyond Rent.
Joe, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today. I am fired up about this.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Obviously, you're an expert when it comes to digital payments. Everyone knows what digital payments are, but I think we really want to uncover what it means, the impact on the actual business, on the industry, because there's a lot going on with digital payments. It's not as always simple as people think it might be. So I can't wait to learn more from you, Chris. But before we talk digital payments, let's actually talk about you. Go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us what you're all about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, hey, Chris Helmers, head of sales and client success here at Zego, formerly known as PayLease. PayLease has been doing online payments since 2003. I've been with the company going on a decade now, with my whole time focused on that. Born and raised in Illinois, currently live in Portland, Oregon, with my wife, my two kids, my dog, my two chickens. It gets pretty wild out there sometimes, but that's what I'm all about here.
Yeah, two chickens. I did not know about the chickens. We'll have to talk more about that.
We
later.
had more. It's a different story for another time.
I've got a friend that just got into chickens, and I guess it's a whole culture.
It's a tricky subject. A lot of walking on eggshells.
Oh, yeah. Very nice. Hopefully there's not a lot of egg puns later on today. So so you've been with Zego for a long time. And for many of you that watch the podcast know that Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager. We partner with Zego. We've partnered with Zego for a very long time. We were talking about that earlier. Today, the really long-standing relationship that we have for online payments. So you've really helped us in a number of ways to take care of our customers, take care of the residents when it comes to online payments. And they're really important, right? People rely on these rent payments. They rely on different types of payments to make their business function. So help me set the stage a little bit. Where are we at with digital payments? What's kind of the spotlight or the snapshot of what is happening in the industry today? Where are we at with digital payments?
Absolutely. 10 years ago when I started, a lot of folks still weren't paying their rent online. Even as property management companies, they weren't necessarily partnered with somebody like a Zego. And that's changed a lot. COVID changed that a ton. Everybody went home. Everybody needed that option to do it. But today, roughly around 68% of all payments are digitized, which means there's another 30+% of payments that are still being by checks. Disclaimer, Joe, I'm going to be referencing a couple of facts today. Zego's actually publishing a new ebook in January. We're recording this here in December. By the time you all listen to this, that should be published. So reach out. We'll get your hands on it. But we partnered with a third-party firm, SA Market Insights, to gather this data, pulling a whole bunch of property managers and residents to get a better idea of a true snapshot of what 2025 and 2026 looks like.
So to restate that, right, you're saying over 30% of payments are still paper, right? They are non-digitized payment. And for me, that seems almost crazy because I can't think of the last time I paid anything with paper, even cash. I don't know the last time I used cash. So, for many of us, that seems a little foreign, but the data is saying that we still have a really, really long way to go. So let's turn the clock back a little bit. You've been with Zego for over a decade. You said you've been doing digital payments at Zego since 2003, right?
That's right.
So walk me through the history of digital payments and kind of how we got to where we're only above 60%, because there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Payment processing in the United States is very different. If we look overseas, electronic payments are very, very common. But the thing we continue to hear here in the States, at least, is this is how it's always done. And a lot of this revolves, who's paying rent out with paper? It's two folks. It's the underbanked, people who don't have access to traditional financial systems, and it's probably an aging population who is a little more adverse to technology. And regardless of wherever that is, there's a lot of friction there. receiving those paper payments. It's more costly. There's more opportunities for fraud. It's slower to reconcile those payments. Maybe you got to take it to the bank. So the pain is huge for property managers. And if we wind back to 2003, the conversation was, hey, property manager, you should be offering online payments. And then maybe like, I don't know if anybody really wants that. Now everybody's offering online payments, and the burden of use has really shifted to the resident now. And that's where a lot of these challenges lie right now.
Yeah, it is interesting to think that back then you really had to sell this idea of an online payment. Again, it was easy. People accepted checks. They didn't really think about any of those factors, the labor, the fraud, and things tied to it. We're not really as kind of a standard. Do you feel like most property management companies are making a really concentrated effort to get people onto a digital payment at this point? Or is it a little bit more of like, well, if they want to do it, they can. If they don't, then it's not a big deal? Where do you think the temperature lies with PMs?
It's across the board. You've got your mom and pop shops. It's a guy who's acquired a couple properties, maybe a couple single family homes. Is this his priority? Maybe not. He's happy just to collect it. But your more sophisticated operators, which is where the market is going, it does feel that our industry has always been a little behind the times with technology. So as that really comes up and maybe the institutional money gets a little more sophisticated, cash flow is becoming more important. We're seeing a reduction in staff at an operational level. So they need tools that can do more for them. And I think, you called out already, our partnership enables each other. So your solution is enhanced by us and our solution is enhanced by you. And those technologies has developed dramatically over the last couple of years, as the demands of the resident have changed as well. So where it's kind of, Amazon always has that final mile problem of like, it's the hardest part is getting the package from the truck to the doorstep. It's kind of the same thing. There's a chunk of residents who are really there, and putting the tools in front of the property operators to go ahead and incentivize, remind, encourage, doing things like rent reminders through your system, all that's going to help change that tide.
Yeah. And you've seen it because you've been doing it for over a decade, that adoption rate continues to go up. So like what I did say, well, we still have 30% to go. It seems like a lot, but when you started, I don't know what that percent was, but I'm sure it was a fraction of that, right? And year after year, we see those numbers go up. We see more, like you said, modern take on the resident experience and the tools that we provide them. When it comes to the actual renter and how the renter has shifted, you talked about some different pockets of people and maybe the way that they view payments or how they view even their finances are changing. So let's break some of those down. Who are the ones that are, I guess, most likely to demand online payments? Not even want it, but actually demand it. Is there certain demographics that we see or that you hear about?
Yeah, the easy ones to pick on, low-hanging fruit, younger generations. You think about, millennials were born without that technology, but they were young when this technology was introduced. So it's very native to them. Some of them were using it in high school, college. So by the time they graduated, maybe they were still writing checks, but there was an expectation there. But Gen Z, Gen Alpha, when they start renting, will they even know what a check is? Are they going to be asking that question? They're so used to everything's on their phone. They click a button and it interacts with everything. So that is a huge, huge demand. And then if I was to pick a third category, I would say your more savvy buyers, folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they're buying everything online. Why aren't they paying their rent online? Most people don't have desktops anymore. They probably have a laptop, but everybody's living on their phone. And that expectation to have that mobile first payment experience, it's critical everywhere we go.
Yeah, and I think that mobile first piece is, something we've talked about for a long time, well over a decade, maybe even 2 decades now. But I really don't think most industries have gotten there until like the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. I even think it wasn't that long ago that I was still printing out like paper boarding passes to fly. Not because I didn't have the app. I just didn't feel like I needed to use it or wasn't as convenient. It was just as easy just to check in, print it out and go about my day. And now I don't do that anymore. Right. So even for somebody my age or, even slightly younger, I think it even took all of us a little bit of time to fully embrace some of these mobile first mentalities. And then the technology had to catch up to it as well. I don't think that the mobile first apps and websites that were out 10 years ago really were that great, right? When we really talk about it.
Yeah. Fragmented tech stacks. The flight analogy is such a good one. I remember when I first started to fly a lot for work, I was always printing them out. This was probably 2017. And I was at the airport and this guy was struggling with this phone to get it to scan. I was like, That's why I do the paper ones. And you can imagine what that experience looked like. You go to a portal, or worse, you go to a non-mobile friendly browser on your phone. It already stinks. And then you click the pay button and it rips you out of that browser to something else that's even more clunky. And all this, you're trying to thumb in your information, your accounting information, or punch in a credit card. You're just like, this is not worth it. I've been paying a certain way for forever. But that's gone. Now everything's native, everything's built in, it's seamless, whether it's just porting you over directly to it or like with Rent Manager and Zego, the payment functionality is right there in the app or on the online portal. Click pay, you set, forget, and it's all right there.
Yeah, and I wonder, you talked about those demographics that are most likely to demand online payments. I wonder how many of those that fall outside of that category had some of those bad boarding pass experiences, bad payment portal experience, and really have just never come back to it and still are saying, well, it's not for me, or I tried it once and it didn't work. Because, trust is difficult, right? Once you break trust once, it's like, well, I don't know. Even when I started using mobile apps for flying, I still sometimes printed that paper one as a backup just in case, right? And I think a lot of consumers are that way. Yeah. You have to have kind of that repetitive experience.
Early on, it was when we were more focused on the property operators to convince them that, hey, there's so much value in getting away from paper payments. That was a completely different conversation and value sell. And now with the residents, what we're trying to do is change is human behavior. And that's a really tough thing to do. How do you incentivize them? I said it already, but simple things like rent reminders and sending out that information. And you just need to capture that digital payment one time, and then you've converted them for life. So lots more room to go. Outside just traditional pay your rent online with a credit card, ACH check, or anything like that. Capturing those physical payments and digitizing, ever more important. Making sure Zego offers a solution, as you might know, where you can take a money order and go pay with cash at a Kroger or Walmart. Digitize that payment. So even if we're not actually getting them to go online, we still want to digitize that payment for the property manager, because all of the plethora of value that comes with it, regardless of how it's digitized, the fact that it is going to go a long way. Yeah,
you had spoke about the underbanked population, and I think that's a critical piece that I think we've done a good job solving for within our solution and our partnership. And a lot of people I don't think are quite aware that some of those solutions exist. So you brought them up briefly, but maybe let's dive into those, because I think those are interesting, because they kind of allow the resident to continue to do what they want to do while letting the PM do what they want to do, right? The PM wants a digital payment. Mm-hmm. Maybe the resident needs or wants to have a paper payment, and it allows them to meet in the middle.
Yep. So starting with the value for the property manager, when a transaction's digitized, it's going to integrate back into their software. Cash flow is going to be faster. All the things that go with it. For the renter, it's convenience, right? If you're buying money orders, you're going somewhere, buying 1, 2, and then you have to grab it, take it back, hope that nobody steals it. You hear those horror stories 15, 20 years ago of people pouring gasoline in a rent box to say, oh, no, my rent never got in. Like, those days are long in the past now. But that experience is pretty terrifying for a property manager and for the resident. Communication is a huge piece of it. Can I share a stat with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. 86% of property operators say they offer flexible payment options or the ability to pay your rent in installments. 60% of renters say those options don't exist or they're unaware. There's a huge communication gap going on where it's up to property managers and, of course, the vendors they're working with to get that information out there. But you could be doing everything. You're sending the emails, posting online, putting it in all the different places, having flyers up in your property. But if the resident doesn't see it, they don't see it.
Yeah, that stat really is telling of the state of communication too, right? And I'm not putting the blame on the PM in any way, but I just think there's a reality of you can be doing all the right things as a business, but if the consumer, whoever that is, in this case it's the renter, isn't hearing that message, they don't know it exists. And I think this happens all over the place, right? Missed opportunities for communication. And the reality is, as the renter, I'd have to think, they've decided how they're going to pay and they just keep paying the same way, assuming it's either the best way, the easiest way, the preferred way, whatever it might be. And it really is going to take some effort, as you mentioned previously, to shift that behavior and get them to do something different. But once you have them, you have them. But that stat is really compelling.
It's another one for you. 27% of renters pay late at least once a year. So again, you could be doing everything the same, but you don't know what's going on in that renter's life. And times are tough right now. Cash flow's tight. Everything's more expensive. Wages have stagnated. The cost of rent has gone up, understandably, because the cost of everything else is going up. So sometimes they just can't even pay it online at that time, or they need to wait because the funds aren't available. Maybe they're in the gig economy and their funds are not available at that time. So there's 100 factors that go into it. And my advice for any properties out there that are frustrated with their e-payment adoption, 1, go Zego, but 2, cut yourself some slack. There's a lot working against you here, and that's okay. We'll get there.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about fraud. You said that word earlier. It's a word I hear every single day in multiple different areas. I want to hear more about what you're hearing, what you know about the state of fraud as it relates to digital payments, because that is a risk, right? That exists within the whole payment processing process. So tell me about fraud.
It's not new, first of all, right? Back in the day, people were washing checks, doing all sorts of wild things, burning cash boxes to say that the payment never happened. But 21st century solutions bring 21st century problems, and there's always going to be something in there. I've got more stats. I'm going to stay on this train for a bit.
Yeah.
1 in 3 operators experienced non-payment due to fraud in the past 12 months. So a third of all property management companies, 20% or 1 in 5 of operators lost over $40,000 to payment fraud. So it's a known problem. It's a painful problem. We know it's happening. We know it's affecting the bottom lines. How and why it's occurring is continuing to shift. A couple common types: identity theft, fake income verification, check fraud, payment reversals, chargeback abuse. The one we were just talking about today that's ever prevalent. You go to apply for an apartment, you put the application fee on a credit card, you get denied the apartment, you call it fraud. And the credit card company is happy to eat a $50 fee because they're making millions and sometimes millions, but that can be significant. And that's part of, and it's fraud is what it is. They signed an agreement to pay it. And these are tricky things to track.
They really are tricky. And when I talk to property managers, these are real pain points for them. It is a real point of frustration. And you might think, whatever the application fee is, $25, $50, $100, the big scheme of things, not the end of the world. It's not going to cause them to shut their doors. But when it's happening over and over again, and as people in the industry know, that application process isn't a free process that they're going through. That's labor intensive. They're using screening services and so forth that have a real cost to them. So when those things are happening, that's a pain for the PM to deal with. And then do you go and do you fight that chargeback and the amount of time it takes to fight the chargeback to get your $50? Like, there's not a break-even point in any of that.
It's tough. But the good news about electronic payments is there are technologies that can help. So 90% of operators expressed concern around check fraud. Think about it. If there's a fraudulent check, you can't verify that check, right? You can't have that two-factor authentication. Nobody's going to be there and say, "Is this really you, Joe? Did you really write this check?" Like that. That's just not going to happen. But we know that there's verification with the credit cards. We can do things like verify the funds that are in somebody's bank account. And more tools are coming available every single day. So not only can it help minimize fraud by digitizing everything, it creates a better paper trail for everything. And then of course there's new technologies to be overlaid on top of it. But we have seen an increase of fraud in the last couple of years. It makes sense. Times are getting tough. People are, of course, having cash flow challenges at home, and sometimes that leads them to do things that aren't the best.
Absolutely. You had mentioned income verification fraud. Obviously, that's not necessarily within the digital payments realm, but we do hear that a lot in our industry right now. And a lot of it is a reaction to the fact that rents have gotten so high that a lot of people can't qualify to live the place they want to live. And while it's not right, I think we all can understand the motivation that they're under to maybe submit something that's fraudulent to try to get in there. And I don't know the numbers, and maybe you've got some insight into this. I'd imagine whatever fraud that you're seeing on the digital payment side with chargebacks or whatever the case may be, that still is minimal compared to the threat of theft and fraud that would happen through cash payments or written checks and things like that. You said like check washing. Well, it's not that prevalent. It's still a thing that can happen, right? That check has your bank account information. You can process ACH payments based on that. So I'd imagine that risk is still much higher than anything you'd experience on the digital payment side.
Absolutely. We'll go back to pick on the one that probably hasn't happened in over a decade, but I love the story. You know, somebody puts cash in an envelope, puts it in a Dropbox, somebody dumps gasoline, burns it down. How do you prove who did that? How do you prove how much rent was in there? And there's no recourse there. At least with something like credit card fraud, one, it's transacted so we can report on it. And that's powerful in its own right. It's good to understand how big of a problem it is so we can set KPIs and benchmarks and work towards it. But again, if you go back to these, with the physical payments, the challenge is there. It's risky for the resident. It's risky for the property operator. And the impact it's painful.
Yeah, absolutely painful. All right, let's continue the discussion with understanding the impact on property managers and owners as it relates to digital payments. What are some of the key areas that people need to know about the true impact on the operational side and the experience that the PMs have?
Yeah, I think the cash flow uncertainty is probably one of the biggest ones, depending on how you're operating your property or your ownership groups and things like that. If there's a lot of fraudulent payments coming through, a couple of missed rent payments can be critical, and you might need that cash on hand. And even if you recover that fraud payment, if you don't have the right partner that's actually working to get that chargeback resolved or working with the bank to get a return expedited, it could be months to get that back. You might lose it. They might not fight it properly. You might never get it back. So if you can stop that fraud from occurring in the first place, or having a great partner help fight you on the back end, increase cash flow, staff workload. It takes a ton of time to fight these. And Zego's, we're very proud of our chargeback win rate and how we go about and do it. It takes us a ton of time. And it still takes the property team. They have to go gather all the documentation to prove the case and submit it and all that. I got another stat for you. I know you've been loving my stats. Evictions due to fraudulent leases can cost upwards to $100,000. That was reported by the National Apartment Association, by NAA. Think about it, slows down. Somebody's committing this fraud. You start the eviction process, which can take months on its own. You never recover those funds. And all of a sudden you're turning a unit and all the costs that go into that. And it's just uncollected rent and vacancy. It can really add up into lost dollars. And it's, everybody's fighting for those residents right now to provide that quality experience and fill it. And there's so much competition depending on where you're at right now. And that can make a huge impact. Lastly, resident trust can make, if the payment system feels outdated or insecure, it can erode resident trust. We feel it everywhere we go, where if it seemed, just today, when we were talking earlier, I got a text that said, reset your Instagram platform or your Instagram login. I was like, I didn't log into Instagram at all today. That freaked me. I was like, where is this coming from? How many people are getting those and then falling for it? So if you have an experience or a payment processor or a partner, a technology partner that feels antiquated, that can create a high level of distrust with your renters. And frankly, it can sour a relationship with your property team.
Well, absolutely. And I think we've all had some level of an experience. You talked about going to a website that's not mobile friendly, but it can even be on a desktop, a laptop computer. You might be trying to pay, a medical bill or whatever, and you go to a portal that you feel like was built in 1995, and almost instantly you start questioning yourself. Like, do I really trust this platform? Is this really how I want to make my payment? How do I verify this is real? Because it just doesn't feel right. The renter's no different, right? They expect a modern experience. Yeah.
It's a requirement now. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's a need to have if you want to be competitive in this marketplace.
So if a renter ends up in a place where they feel like maybe it is an antiquated experience and they don't really trust it, do you think they fall back on traditional payment methods at that point? Or do they end up calling the PM and just saying, hey, I want to make sure I'm on the right website? Like, what do you think happens in those scenarios? Because if I'm somebody that's dedicated to a digital payment, I feel like I'm still not going to write a check. I'm going to find a way to still make that payment the way I want to make it.
It's a good, I don't have a stat to that. It's an interesting one though. I think if we wind this conversation back, there's three camps that people are going to fall in. There's people who always want to pay online. There's people that are never going to pay online for the reasons we discussed. And then there's those people who are stuck in the middle. The people who, they're probably going to lean more towards paying online, but a thing like this could deter them. Like, I will fall back on the old one. Or the other cost of that is they are reaching out to the site team and not bothering them. That's their jobs, but like that, they're busy folks. They're wearing a lot of hats. And to sit there and have those conversations, or maybe bring somebody into an office and set up their profile for them, while important for the business, it's not always the best use of their time. There's so many other things they could be doing to better their properties.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's not a great resident experience either. The resident doesn't want to call and need help with those things, right? They want to be able to self-service just like most residents would. So no, that's great. So when we think about especially around these things around fraud with payments and stuff like that, how do people actively reduce their risk? Because I think that's what most people are saying when they say, hey, I'm getting chargebacks on application fees, or I'm seeing this happen, or these different scenarios. What they're really saying is, help me solve for this because this is a pain point.
Number one thing we've been talking about this whole time, push more online payments, get people away from those paper payments. There's so much more risk there. And so from there, it's leveraging things like rent reminders that Rent Manager does so well. Shout out Rent Manager. Or if they're never going to pay online, pushing those, the digitization of physical payments via cash pay, check scanners, anything that stops that paper trail is going to help increase it. ID verification and income verifications, things you called out, all that's going to make sure that the renters are fitting that profile and trying to identify that risk up front. Fraud detection. There's a bunch of tools out there. I think this is one of the exciting places we're going to see AI start to bubble up, not to use a buzzword here, but it is a perfect overlay. You've got a machine that's scrubbing all that data, identifying patterns and seeing that risk. And it's not crazy to think that very, very soon that we're going to be able to leverage that to call those out. One of the things we haven't really talked about yet, but another danger is around security deposits. 40% of operators have concerns around fraud for security deposits. Usually a month's rent, 2 months rent, depends on where you live. You're just sending a check out into the ether to a place you hope you gathered the right address moving forward. And once it's out, can you ever get that money back? Or what if it doesn't go to the right place? And then the real renter reaches out and you have a legal obligation to cut them another check. An emerging trend we're seeing is the digitization of sending out those security deposits. And it's a great tool for reducing that risk.
Yeah, security deposits are really interesting. We have talked quite a bit about that, just the two of us previously, and talking about antiquated processes, right? This idea of somebody moving out and trying to make sure you get the right address, you're writing a paper check to them, all of these things are really way behind for most operators, right? As far as like a modern process or digitizing things. So I think that's really important. And there are a lot of regulations around security deposits as well. So there's multiple areas of risk here, right? They could fall outside of regulation if they don't get it out soon enough, or like you're saying, if that check ends up in the wrong hands, what do you do then? And is that what you're hearing from PMs? They end up coming out of pocket to cover?
It can be. You call that there's a world of risk around security deposits, managing the regulations, managing the holding of the funds and reversing the funds. As things get tighter and it's more important to get your security deposit back on time. I think they're starting to see a demand from the renter as well, which is also why you've seen multiple companies crop up over the last few years, or products like our resident payouts tool that we're going to be launching pretty soon. Like these are born out of needs and ask from clients. These weren't invented in some kind of a lab. These are tools that are built to solve real problems that our mutual clients are coming and asking us about.
Yeah. And I think from the renter side, it's an odd experience as well that potentially they paid the security deposit initially through a digital payment, and then they move out and they get a paper check. And like you're saying, younger generations are going to say, I don't know what to do with this piece of paper that you sent me. Can I have my money? I asked for my money back, not an IOU or whatever you want to call this check. So I think from the renter experience side, they are going to start demanding that they get these security deposits back digitally. And it's a better experience for them, right? Because they don't have to go to a bank. They don't have to do the mobile deposit, whatever it might be. They can just have the funds directed right back into their account.
One of the guys on our sales team shared a story that he and his buddies recently out of college were all living together, and then they lived together for a bunch of years, and then eventually they moved out. And when they moved out, they were given one check for the four of them, but all of their names were on it. So they all had to go to the bank at the same time. But one of the guys that already moved away moved out of state. So they had to wait months to go ahead and cash the thing because they couldn't, it's expensive to, get a flight or drive back. And why? It's 2025. Why is that happening? It doesn't need to happen, but it's tough.
Those are bad experiences. That's for sure. You've talked a number of times about really pushing for more digital payments and to kind of continue to drive that number up. We've talked about rent reminders. Are there other tips that we can give the property managers on really driving that forward? Are there methods of giving incentives or different motivations towards the digital payment versus the paper?
Yeah, there's 3 pillars to me. The first one is resident education. And that would fall into the category of rent reminders. Or if you have a welcome packet, make sure that telling them how to pay online and really just saying that, no, this is the only option, start there. The next one is staff education, because if the staff doesn't know how to use the tool, they're certainly not going to be telling residents how to use it. And if they're not bought into the value behind it of how it's going to save, the property money, which is going to secure them some future, have job security, save them time, all those things, then they're not going to help support those efforts. The last bucket is, I think, what you're kind of getting to, which is incentives. And there's a couple ways to do this. The easy one right now is if you're working with anybody, any payment processor, there's different things you can do with fees, incurring fees. If you make ACH free for the resident, you're going to see higher adoption. And that is a huge perceived value to the resident. And we know it's a big tangible value for the property. Another exciting emerging area where Zego is starting to tip our toes in the water, and I know you all have been exploring it as well, is things like resident rewards. Rewarding and incentivizing that behavior and putting a couple bucks back in their pocket or treating them to something. Encourage the behavior you want by giving back. This is another thing that's cropped up over the last couple of years because they're looking for more and more ways residents are getting rewarded for going to their coffee shop, spending $5 on a cup of coffee or $15 for your mocha latte, if that's still what you drink. Why not on the largest transaction that they make every single month?
That's right.
And now it's becoming a demand. So yeah, find those incentives, educate, train, put the information out there.
Now, the idea behind managing those fees is really interesting. In most areas, you're required to offer at least one form of payment at no cost. And it's amazing how many PMs are still defaulting to the check being the no cost one, because that's what we've always done, right? That's kind of the mentality where in their eyes, there's no direct fee that they're taking on. What they don't realize is the cost of the labor, the risk of the fraud and theft and things like that are tied to that paper check. We're making that ACH the free option, getting people that direction. I know for me, I probably would pay with the method that's free, right? Why pay more when you can pay less? I mean, that's common sense to me and I think to many people out there as well. So I think that's a great one. The resident rewards is really interesting. Those have been around for a while. I think they've taken different shapes and forms. And I think that market's maturing, that product is maturing. I think we're trying to figure out what that looks like. And we're having lots of industry conversations on what that could look like and what that should look like. I'm excited for that because I think there are ways that we can incentivize good behavior, on-time payments, all of those things that the resident actually wants to do, but why not give them a little nudge in the right direction, especially you said those people that are kind of in the middle as far as like, will they pay online? Will they not pay online? Will they pay on time? Will they not pay on time? Give those people a nudge the right direction. Yeah.
And what's interesting is you can give rewards that are probably given out already. It's not uncommon in this market to give out serious concessions, whether that's discounted rents off. You can take that same money you were going to spend and not disguise it, but spoof it as a reward and funnel it back to them and create spot rewards. And again, incentivize different behaviors, whether it's submitting maintenance requests online or interacting with the property app if that's something you have, or of course paying your rent online, calling that out, identifying it, and putting the tools in the hands of your site team to go ahead and execute on it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Excellent. Well, Chris, we're kind of turning the corner more towards the end of our conversation here. And I've got a really interesting question for you. So you've done digital payments for over a decade. Let's fast forward a decade. Where are we at with digital payments in a decade from now? Right? Because I would have thought that 10 years ago, if I were to ask you that question then, you'd be like, oh, digital payments, 100%. No one's taking paper, but we're not there yet, right? So are we there in a decade?
Are we there in a decade? I don't think America will be there in a decade. I think, and that's one of the cool things about America is I would say our ruralness and how vast this country is. And that's a big aspect of it. You've got folks who are averse to technology, and that's that individualistic nature of the American cowboy that we all love so much. It's hard to tell. There's so much going on. The technology is rapidly advancing. Am I going to scan my chip in my arm and pay rent that way? I don't know. It's interesting to watch the regulations around a lot of this. I expect laws to shape a lot of where this future goes. Seeing, last year there's a lot of noise around junk fees. Shout out Ticketmaster for putting insane charges on simple transactions. I mean, that $50 on top of a $200 ticket's silly. But are we going to see that trickle in to property management? It's possible. Are we going to see changes to what fees can be assessed for this outside of that and not labeling junk fees? It's possible. Will it continue to become an expectation, and that's going to shift that resident behavior and more likely? I don't know. I wish I had that crystal ball. If I did, I'd be a lot richer. I'll tell you that.
Well, it is interesting. And you talk about junk fees. I think that's a very compelling topic. And even this idea that most consumers do not know that different payment methods have a different cost attached to them. But we're seeing more and more. Some businesses are starting to pass along processing fees to the consumer. Retail doesn't really do it right now, but we're seeing it a little bit in restaurants. Obviously, we do it in our industry, right? So they may experience it with us. I wonder how much more of that will become common, or if we'll all just embrace this idea of we'll just build it into the price, right? Make it easy, build it in the price, and make it not transparent to the consumer. Or is it better for the consumer to know, hey, if I go to Target and I get to the final transaction and it says, hey, if you pay by Visa, it's going to be 2%. If you pay by American Express, it's going to be 3.5% charge on top of what you bought today. Do we do it that way? Do we make it really transparent and let the consumer decide?
So it used to be like that. I remember when I first started, we charged separate fees for Amex, and it made much more sense to just kind of blend it together from a business perspective. But there's ruling, I believe it was just last week, where merchants can choose not to accept certain types of rewards cards because the interchange fee behind, you grab 10 different Visa cards and they could all have different back-end cost to the merchant. And they can now choose and have a little bit more flexibility on what to accept and not what to expect. Somebody like a Walmart's not going to care; they're so big. But if it's a mom and shop pizza joint, like a couple bips on a credit card transaction for pizza can really add up over time. And the one thing that's been lingering over all of us here in the payment processing field is blockchain payments and crypto payments. What is that going to look like? Nobody's really been able to crack that. But if stable coins kind of grows and turns into something and that starts to be a demand on younger generations where they feel more comfortable leveraging crypto payments, it's going to have to, it sounds silly now to pay your rent in Bitcoin, but who knows? In 10 years, it could be the norm.
Well, we should mark the calendar now, December 2035. We should sit down and have this conversation and see where we're at, because we're not going to try to predict the future today, but I think it is really interesting to think where it's going to go. I agree with you. I don't think we're at 100% digital payments in 10 years. Seeing what I've seen, even with fast-moving technology, things like that, I still think there's always going to be different markets, different demographics that just really want to write a check. Maybe it's not checks at that point. Maybe it's still cash, whatever it might look like. I think there's always going to be that little bit of the market that kind of lingers for a while.
Maybe we go analog. Maybe people get tired of AI and technology, just like vinyl's blown up and come back and it surpasses certain digital sales. Maybe, I hope not. I certainly hope we don't go in that direction, but you never know. It's an interesting little place we got here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Either way, we'll be here to help support the PMs and the residents all along the way and create good experiences. So if you had any closing remarks, closing takeaways as we kind of wrap things up, what do people need to know?
The number one piece of advice always, get a good partner. If you trust Rent Manager, they're a wonderful partner. If you want to trust Zego, we're a great partner. If you don't want to trust either of us, that's okay too. Just find somebody who's going to knows the best practices, somebody who can show you the right way to do it, be that consultant, be that guide. The information is out there. It exists. It's not locked behind doors anymore. It can be at your fingertips. So you want somebody who can help guide you through that process, because property management is such a diverse business where, a Class A beautiful high-rise building is going to be so different than a manufactured housing community that's on the border of Texas somewhere. Like, there's such a diversity there in how those properties operate and what those resident demographics are. So somebody who understands those nuances and help craft a plan and give you those insights. And of course, give you the data. Data is king on everything. And if you don't understand where your performance is today, you'll never know what you need to change to get to a place that you want to.
That's so smart. You're absolutely right. You have to know where you're at, and you have to know where you want to go and understand the difference between those two to get there. And you're right, our industry is very diverse. But at the end of the day, it's always somebody's home that we're talking about, and it's the largest payment most likely that they're making. every month. So it's a big deal to them. It's a big deal to us, and we have to take it serious. And I know the Zego team always takes things really serious because it is important, again, to the PM, to the resident, to us, to everyone involved. And a lot of fun that we get to have making sure it's a good experience for everyone.
I agree.
Excellent. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk about digital payments and all the things that people really should know. You had mentioned an ebook, so I'm going to let you maybe plug that one more time real quick, timing and so forth for that.
It's going to be released in January. We'll do a wonderful job publishing it. You can find it on Zego's website. That's where we keep all of our user manuals, if you want to call them that. But yeah, like I said, we interviewed a lot of property operators, a lot of residents to grab this data and kind of bring it up and share these thoughts. So keep an eye out for it. It's going to be really useful, really helpful. It's going to be a good read.
Excellent. Well, we'll drop some links into the show notes. Again, this is probably releasing in March, so that ebook is out there and ready. Well, Thanks a lot, Chris, for your time.
Joe, my pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thank you to our audience for listening to another episode. And until next time, keep going beyond rent.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Beyond Rent. If you enjoyed this podcast, spread the word on social media and with your peers in the industry. To be notified when more episodes are released, subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager Property Management Software. Learn more about Rent Manager's industry-leading software solutions at rentmanager.com. Until next time, keep going beyond rent.